Good morning everyone and welcome to today's WorkSafe Tasmania Month webinar, Small Business, Protect Your Reputation, Know Your Discrimination Rights and Responsibilities. I'm Stephanie from WorkSafe Tasmania and also the coordinator of WorkSafe Tasmania Month. I'll also be your moderator for this morning's session. Before we do start though, I'd appreciate you taking a few moments to read the following slide about information received during WorkSafe Month webinars. I'd now like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in this morning's webinar. So we've taken a screenshot of an example of the attendee interface. So you should see something that looks like this on the left-hand upper right-hand corner of your computer screen. You're likely listening in using your computer's speaker default system. However, if you would prefer to join by the phone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. You will also have the opportunity to submit questions to today's presenter by typing questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during this morning's presentation. We will collect these questions and address them during and also at the end of the presentation. We are recording webinars run during WorkSafe Tasmania Month and will progressively make them available on the WorkSafe site at the end of WorkSafe Tasmania Month, which concludes on the 30th of October. Lastly, once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation and we would appreciate you completing that survey, providing us with your feedback, your comments about the presentation and also your webinar experience. It is now my pleasure to hand you over to Ros Smart from the Office of the Anti-Discrimination Commissioner to present this morning's webinar, Small Business, Protect Your Reputation, Know Your Discrimination Rights and Responsibilities. Welcome, Ros.
Good morning. Thanks, Steph. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for attending. I think we haven't run a small business course for quite a while in regards to WorkSafe Month, and of course this is the first year for webinars. Small business, I think, has some unique challenges sometimes in regards to discrimination. Small business is trying to balance the, being fair to individuals, keeping people happy, complying with the law, as well as allowing their business to prosper. Often they don't have an HR department, so there's a lot of considerations. The thought of having quite, comprehensive discrimination policies when you're only a small business can also be a bit of a frustration. So please feel free to pop in any questions as you go through, as Steph just said, or otherwise at the end is fine, or also feel free to get in touch with us at some other stage. Okay, so what we thought we'd do just to start, there's just two polls that I'm pulling up onto the screen. And I don't know if Steph needs to explain, but it should be down the right-hand side in your panel to respond to those polls describing your awareness of anti-discrimination legislation with 4 options. I don't know anything, I've heard about it, I'm familiar, or I have good knowledge and understanding. Just something that will help me as I bang on for the next hour. There we go. If you could.
So if everyone can go through and select a response, we'll just give everyone a few minutes to do that. So I'll close the poll, Ros, and share the results.
Okay, good. Oh, excellent. So we have a whole bunch of people that know lots of stuff. That's great. And then there's a second poll. Steph, if you could pull that up. This second one is the size of your organisation, which would be quite useful. Obviously, we're talking small business, but people might have different perceptions of what that might be. So the second poll, when it appears, have you got that, Steph?
Yep.
Almost. It's coming up. Okay, so what is the size of your organisation? 2 to 5 employees, 6 to 15, 16 to 40 or 40 plus. If you could please take a minute to fill that one out as well, that would be great.
So again, I'll close that poll and share the results.
Thanks, Steph. Okay. Excellent. So no one's tiny. Good-o. Okay, thank you very much. Just to take over from your mouse, Steph. So the things I guess that I thought were important to cover today was number one, why does this matter to me? Why is discrimination important? What is discrimination, and then what are your responsibilities as a small business owner, operator? This slide is just one of our posters. We have a suite of 12 posters. If you would like posters in your organisation, if you'd like to get in touch and have us send you some, please do. I guess as an educator in the discrimination space, the way I always think of it is the more we can put in front of people's faces, perhaps the less likely they may be to do things that they shouldn't, such as a poster saying sexual harassment is bad may actually be sometimes something worth having. All right, so why does this matter to me? Why does discrimination matter? Being aware of discrimination legislation will help you protect yourself and your business from complaints of discrimination, harassment and bullying, okay? And that's what you want to do. That's what it's about. Discrimination, the Anti-Discrimination Commission is not about, you know, how much trouble, how much grief can we give you and how much can we put you into, get you into trouble. It's about how can we make sure that you're fair? How can we make sure that you're getting the best from your business, the best for your clients, and you're not excluding anyone as you go? So how can you run a business that's transparent, inclusive, and treats everyone fairly? An inclusive and fair workplace will equal, and you know, this is not rocket science. It's a good workplace. An inclusive, fair workplace will equal high morale, job satisfaction, which is going to equal good workers because they're going to want to stay, good workers are going to equal your excellent service delivery, which is going to equal less conflict, which is going to equal reduced staff turnover. On the flip side, you've got happy customers. Happy customers means they come back. So all of this, productive and profitable, obviously. On that reduced staff turnover, this is a figure from back in 2010, but 40% of people will leave their workplaces rather than try and deal with how they're being treated. So rather than try and get a response to bullying or harassment or discrimination, it's easier just to leave, even if they don't have a job to go to, which I think is very sad. And that may have been someone that was your best employee, who didn't feel that they were able to raise their issue with you, and it might have been a nice, easy fix. So lots of reasons to take this on. Of course, having diverse staff, the advantages of that is you're going to reflect community. Tasmania is getting more diverse. Your client base is potentially more diverse, and by having staff that reflect that, perhaps it's going to make you more attractive. Better reputation, better public image, better client service delivery, and so forth, as you can read there, which of course all equal minimised legal liability and costs. All right, this next slide is, some people may have seen this, I don't know. This was only August last year, which is just incredible. This was in Darlinghurst in New South Wales. This barista, this cafe owner, he refused to hire a black barista. Sorry, he said his reasons were, all of my customers are white and I don't think they're going to want their coffee made by a black person. And he thought that was completely justified. I wonder if he hadn't have done that, if this business would still be operational. Because if you follow the story, what happened then is there were a whole bunch of customers that thought, I don't think we agree with that, put out their placards, refused to go in. He lost an incredible amount of business to the point where he no longer has that business. I wonder if he had have known his anti-discrimination responsibilities, I wonder if he would have still be active and thriving and potentially have the best barista in the whole of Darlinghurst, potentially. Okay, so the Anti-Discrimination Act. I'm going to go through a little bit with you as to what this actually is. Every state in Australia has an Anti-Discrimination Act, and of course there's plenty worldwide as well. Our office, the Office of the Anti-Discrimination Commissioner, is where we're responsible for looking after the Anti-Discrimination Act. The Act is there to prohibit discrimination and other specified conduct, which we'll have a look at, such as sexual harassment, victimisation, and it's to provide for investigation and conciliation and inquiry into complaints. Now, a lot of people seem to think that the Anti-Discrimination Commission and the Act is again about trying to get people into, trying to deal with complaints, and that's the main purpose of us. In actual fact, under the Act, the Commissioner has 10 things, I guess, that she has to do. A couple of them obviously apply to dealing with complaints, but a lot of it is about providing education, giving people the information they need to make sure that no one's treated less fairly. And that's what this is about. Discrimination law is really just about making sure that people are treated or chosen or selected for the things that are actually relevant. If something's not inherent, so if we're talking employment, if something's not inherent, then it's not going to be essential, and if you factor it, it's not going to be fair. But if it is inherent, such as if I had no arms and I wanted to be a hairdresser, it's probably going to be incredibly difficult for me to do that job. So it's not discrimination, disability discrimination, if you don't employ me as a hairdresser with no arms. It makes really good sense. And so that's what we're about. We're not talking about, let's say that everything is discrimination. Let's just look at what's going to be reasonable. The purpose of the Act, the purpose of our office, is to try and get resolutions. We want to actually improve workplace relationships and communication. And the thing, I guess, that people sometimes don't really realise, especially very small businesses, is that every single organisation is required to follow the Anti-Discrimination Act. Small business are not exempt, and I know there are other laws out there where if a business is less than 10, they may be exempt from certain things. That doesn't apply for the Anti-Discrimination Act. Every single person in Tasmania will be protected under the Act, okay, unless you work for a federal organisation, then in which case you'd use federal legislation, but every person in Tasmania. So even if I've never been to Tasmania, if I perhaps live in Victoria, I apply online for a job that's being advertised in Tasmania, and I feel that the reason I didn't get that job was because of something that I think may be discriminatory. Even though I've never been to Tasmania, the workplace was here, so therefore I would lodge my complaint under the Tasmanian Act. Okay? So every person or organisation that affects people in Tasmania must comply with the Act. All right, so what is discrimination then? Now, there are actually some handouts attached to this webinar. If you see on the, again, in that right-hand panel, what should be the top one for you guys, Understanding Discrimination. These are actually direct from our website, so you can certainly print them off there, and we have many, many others. But this first one is a fairly simple, and you can have a look at it afterwards. Describes what is discrimination under the Anti-Discrimination Act. Okay, but I'll pop it in a nutshell for you. Very simply, discrimination is three things. Three things for something to be discrimination. There needs to be some sort of less fair treatment or effect. That's number one. It needs to be based on an attribute or a category. And number three, it must be in an area of activity. All right, and we'll look at each of those. This less fair treatment can actually be direct or indirect. People these days tend not to struggle so much with understanding what direct discrimination is. So direct discrimination, perhaps I've been excluded from something because of my race, or I've been provided a lesser service because of my sexual orientation, or if we're talking about accommodation, perhaps there's a rental property that I'd like, but I'm refused. My application is refused on the basis that I'm a family, or on the basis that I'm a young person. These would be direct discrimination, refusing service or giving a lesser service, exclusion, etc. So most people understand that. The other side of discrimination, or the other version of this less fair treatment, if you like, is indirect. Now, indirect is when something often looks like it's okay but actually isn't, or it causes an unfair effect. That's where the effect comes in. The classic example of an indirect discrimination would be a set of stairs into a building. I'm saying, you're all welcome to come into my building. I'd love to have you here. Come on up the stairs. Oh, sorry, you can't. Oh, not my problem. Okay, so the set of stairs is actually a form of indirect discrimination. Because of your disability or whatever it may be, you're unable to use the stairs. Not fair. And I might say, well, that's okay because we've got a ramp, but it's around the back, and you've got to go past the bins, etc., to get to it. Again, that's not fair. That's not the same treatment. So it's a less favourable treatment. Another example of indirect discrimination, perhaps, maybe I have a small business. I actually require all staff to work on Saturdays as part of my small business. If I have a staff member who's Seventh-day Adventist, it may be that they can't work on a Saturday. So my requirement that they do, when because of their religion they can't, may or may not be discrimination. It's going to depend on the circumstances of the workplace. It may be that it's not inherent that everyone actually works on a Saturday. Perhaps there's some other way of looking at this for that particular employee. So it may be that that's the requirement of Saturdays is actually indirect discrimination. Okay, so that's the first part of the definition. That's part one, the less fair treatment. Oh, just something else on less fair treatment, actually. A lot of people, well, often when we talk to respondents to discrimination complaints, they feel like it's the Commissioner has accepted some very small complaint, and they're quite frustrated that why is this a discrimination complaint, because it wasn't that bad treatment, if you like. Under the Act, the Commissioner has to accept anything that is any sort of less fair treatment. It doesn't matter how serious it is. She doesn't get to assess how serious it is. If it's less fair, then it will get accepted. All right, and the second part of the definition is it has to fit into an attribute. In the Tasmanian legislation, we have 22 attributes, which is more than any of the other states. Our Act came in 98, which is perhaps how we got it to be the best. We were the last. And then we had some amendments at the beginning of 2014 where we added a couple of extra ones. So that's EA and EB came in then. So in order for something to be discrimination, you need to be treated less fairly because of one of these things that are on that slide right in front of you right now. A couple of examples, perhaps. So again, think about inherent requirements. Does somebody's race matter to be able to work in your business? Or does somebody's race matter in order to get good service if you're providing a service in your organisation? Example of a discrimination case with someone in relation to race. There was a gentleman who worked in a warehouse, and his supervisor told him that his English wasn't good enough to operate the machinery in that particular warehouse. Turns out that this gentleman had actually got his ticket to operate. He'd passed all the testing. He had the ticket to operate. So there was no good reason. There was nothing at all to say that he wasn't able to do it. He had the piece of paper. He lodged a discrimination complaint and won. Now, if he hadn't have had the paper, if for some reason his ability to understand English was going to affect his ability to do the job, then that would be fine. That would be something that was considered inherent, depending on how it was managed, of course. One for pregnancy. There was somebody who, small business, a lady told her boss, guess what? Hello, yay for me, I'm pregnant. The boss said, well, that's where I stopped being nice, and sacked her. Now that sounds like a pregnancy discrimination complaint to me. There was one, we had just another example. This person alleged discrimination on the basis of marital, parental and family responsibilities. During their initial job inquiry, they were asked, are you married and do you have children? Now, And then the person, of course, answered those questions correctly and didn't obtain an interview. They thought the reason for not getting an interview was probably because of their answers to that question, thus the alleged marital, parental and family responsibilities complaint. The respondent, when asked about the complaint, when we wrote to them and said, what's your idea on this? The response said, no, we were just making conversation. It wasn't discriminatory. At the end of the day, with discrimination law, it actually doesn't matter what your reason is. So it's I was just joking or I was just trying to be friendly is not a defence to a discrimination case. So what happened at the end of this, because again, we're not about trying to put people through the ringer, it was, okay, let's get you guys to have a conversation, let's find out what you would like, let's find out how we make this complaint go away. And for this particular one, the conciliation result was that the complainant wanted an apology, which they received. They wanted the organisation to review their policies, which they did. They wanted the organisation to have training for the rest of the staff to make sure it didn't happen again. And they wanted them to donate $500 to charity, which they also did. So that was, I think that was quite a nice result for that one. There was something the workplace perhaps hadn't even realised they were doing the wrong thing, but by having this education, by going through the process, I think they've probably learned to not go through it again. So a discrimination complaint doesn't have to be nasty. It can just be a nice education process. Well, it's not nice. No complaint's nice, but it's a way of just reviewing your workplace procedures. Now, the third part of the definition for discrimination is it needs to happen in one of our areas of activity. Most of our complaints come from employment, and employment also includes unpaid. So if anyone has volunteers for their organisations, they're covered exactly the same as anybody else would be. Our second highest area of activity is generally provision of facilities, goods and services. We get a lot of disability complaints in that area as well. We get a lot of race complaints. So this is where, on one of those earlier slides I was talking about, the benefits of diversity and the benefits of making sure that you're treating your customers, your clients, in a way that's fair and accessible. Next highest area of activity would be education, training, accommodation. If I can just go back a slide for a second, the highest area in regards to attributes, every year, every state without fail is always disability. For us, for the Anti-Discrimination Commission in Tasmania last year, so this is to be tabled in our new annual report, it'll show that 50% of our complaints last year were disability related. The year prior to that was 60%, which is quite high. For interest sakes, last year, gender was the second highest, age was the third highest, industrial activity next, irrelevant medical record, and race, those were our top ones. Oh, family responsibilities as well. Okay. So that's the definition of discrimination. Less fair treatment based on an attribute or linked to an attribute and fitting an area of activity. Okay. So the next section is what are your responsibilities? Now, another handout that you've got on the right-hand side of your screen there is obligations of organisations. Again, that's one that's directly from our website that you can print off from there if you wish, or it's right there in front of you. What we have in the Anti-Discrimination Act that talks about obligations is Section 104. It's close enough to be called vicarious liability, is how some people may be aware of it. We call it Section 104, and this is all about taking active steps to reasonably prevent discrimination, harassment from happening. That's the purpose of it, okay, which is point 2 in there. The sort of things that you can do in your organisation to follow your reasonable steps are actually on the next slide there. It could be training for all your staff. And now that doesn't have to be, we provide training obviously here, but it doesn't have to be somewhere formal like us. There's no reason why you can't, especially in a small business, actually roll this out yourself. Talk to your staff about what's appropriate. Get a printout from our website and show the staff. Pop it in something quite simple, put it into bullet points and say, okay, this is what we expect as appropriate behaviour. No doubt your workplaces are already talking to your staff about workplace health and safety. I don't doubt at all that you wouldn't already make sure that they're quite clear on where their responsibilities lie in that area. This just fits exactly the same. So talking to people about this can be a really good way. Having something in writing is obviously going to be much better. And since we had no one in that 2 to 5 employees bracket, I think for anyone with a workplace of 5 up, pop something in writing. Well, actually, I think for anyone, but pop something in writing and get your staff. Why not get them to sign it to say that they've read it? But don't just rely on getting them to read it. Actually talk about it, because how many people say that they've read the policy when they actually haven't? I think going a little bit further doesn't hurt. With this, having clear, transparent, well-communicated policies, be also aware of your industry body guidelines. It may be that you already have something for your industry with guidelines around discrimination. Even if you don't have people sign off that you've done the training, keep a diary entry for yourself that this is who we told on this day, because that will help you if you have a complaint against your organisation and we get in touch with you saying, well, what did you do? You know, what did you do to make sure your staff knew about this? You've got that information of who you told, when you told, how you told them. And of course, it also should be in your inductions anyway. Okay. When we talk about workplaces, when we talk about what needs to happen in order to prevent discrimination, we talk about, we may be talking about reasonable adjustments versus unjustifiable hardship. People often say, well, what do I have to do? I have an employee with a disability. How much do I have to change everything to be able to accommodate this employee to make sure I don't have a discrimination complaint made against me? If we're talking about access to services, there's something called the disability standards. Now, any new business or any existing business that has any modifications must be complying with the disability standards. Okay, so that ramps up into the front of your building and a whole bunch of other things like that. But the other adjustments that you might be able to make to your workplace to help this best employee actually be able to do their job, you may make adjustments to the way things are done, to rules, to equipment that people use, to how you're asking people to demonstrate their capacity to do the job, to the way things are communicated. If you normally give people communication in writing, why can't you also give them a printout? And if you're going to give them a printout, is it possible to pop it on a USB so they can print in a larger font, or they can see it in a larger font if they need to? Can the job design be changed? Why is it always done this way? So go back to your position descriptions, think about what you need for someone who does a job, and think about that job design. Think about what is actually essential and what maybe can be done in a little different way. And often people think, well, this is the way it's always been done. If I may, for our office, prior to I started, so my job is to do training around the state. Prior to me, we had a trainer who was sight impaired, had a guide dog. Now, I can't imagine delivering training, unless it was online like this, I can't imagine delivering training without being able to have sight. But Sonia did the job perfectly well for quite a long time. So that's a matter of looking outside the box. How can a job be done differently? Which is pretty cool. Now, as far as unjustifiable hardship, let's imagine I have a business that's on the second floor and there are no lifts. It's a rented space. I have no control over that. I can't put the lift in myself. I'm renting this little bit. It's going to be an unjustifiable hardship to expect me to put in the lift to get that better access. So that would come in unjustifiable hardship. But unjustifiable hardship needs to be more than just a mere inconvenience or the financial side of this needs to be looked at as to how much is that, what is the size of the business, why is this an unjustifiable hardship. Often employers think any disability adjustment is going to cost a lot of money. We found a figure, or Robin, the Commissioner, found a figure from in relation to the Disability Employment Australia, that it costs $200 on average to make these adjustments for people with disability. $200 is not very much at all. The new coffee machine might cost $200. And there's funds available, and you'll see I've got the link down there at the bottom. Go to Job Access, have a look. There's a whole bunch of assistance, money in the assistance fund that people can access to help out with this. So I guess what I'm saying is, don't just say no, maybe give it some thought. And often the person with the disability, if we're talking disability or with the requirements, is going to already know what they need. Sometimes they already come along having that stuff with them. Okay, things to be aware of, and this is just a very short list. It didn't take me long to put this one together. Things that you might need to be aware of in regards to discrimination, in regards to your workplace practices. Think about, and this is the things I was just talking about, your job descriptions. Think about how you advertise your jobs. Think about your application forms. Another example of indirect discrimination would be only having forms in PDF format. If I'm sight impaired and I use a screen reader, I may not be able to read your PDF form. So why can't you send it out in a different format? Am I able to have it posted rather than online? Can I have it in as a Word document rather than a PDF? These are quite easy things, really, just to make your processes more accessible. The way you do interviews. Think about things that happen on the job. There's nothing wrong with having a dress code, as long as your dress code is fair. If you've got a different standard without good reason, females are allowed to wear jewellery, males aren't, that sounds like gender discrimination. So think about what you have, why you have. And we're, just by the way, we're always happy to have a look at any policies if you'd like us to skim through something and have a look for you and see if it reads okay or if there's anything that you may be aware of. We're happy to do that, so please feel free to email if you want to. Be considerate to rostering in regards to days off. If you need to cut hours, if your business has a downturn, whose hours do you cut? Think about how do you make the process as fair as possible. There was a case where a business had a downturn. Well, actually, I'm over in redundancy now here. And what they did was they went with that last people in are the first people to be made redundant. So we employed you last. This was a case in another state, but what actually happened was previously that workplace had refused to employ females, and that only in the last couple of years changed that process. So all of the people that have been recently put on happened to be females, which meant that the redundancies was offered to the females only. So that came in as an alleged gender discrimination, and it had to get looked at by the commission in that state as to, well, why did this happen? Were the women being targeted? This last on, first off situation, was that fair considering the circumstances? And that was all examined as to whether it was discrimination or not. And it wasn't a simple finding, so I won't go on to that. Other things, like where was I? Dress codes, rostering, maternity, parental leave, pregnant workers, flexible work practices, return to work, social media, complaints, promotions, transfers, training. All of these things are worth having a think about. How do you do it? Can you look outside the box? Are you only doing it that way because it's always been done that way? Okay, a couple of other things that are covered, or a few things that are covered under the Anti-Discrimination Act while I'm talking about it. So sexual harassment, I think sexual harassment has changed over the years. I think 20 years ago when I first started talking about this, sexual harassment seemed to be a lot more physical, the cases that we were seeing. These days, 97% of our cases of sexual harassment are non-physical. Now this slide, these pictures came from the Human Rights Commission website, so 97%. 68% of sexual harassment takes place at work, which is quite surprising. Well, it was surprising to me. But this last one is really nice. Only almost half of those complaints, of those harassment instances, will stop after a complaint or a report is made. That's awesome. If people are empowered, if people know how, if people are able to speak up and say that's not okay, then a lot of those cases will stop. But if you read the fine print underneath that, unfortunately only 20% of people will make a formal report or a complaint. Sexual harassment, I think, it's a worry. Go to the website that I've got the link in there. It's called Know the Line. It's a spin-off from the Human Rights website. They have a whole bunch of downloads. They've got some little video clips as well that aren't bad that you could play for your staff. So again, a way of getting that education out yourselves nice and easily. I'll give you an example here of a sexual harassment complaint. This person alleged discrimination, offensive conduct and sexual harassment by their employer. She had had a previous relationship with him that was over, and now she was being subjected to comments about the size of her breasts, derogatory verbal comments, things like that. And the employers, as the employer's defence, they said yes, but it's reciprocal behaviour. The business, when it was examined further, the business actually had no information about workplace bullying. So they did have information about workplace bullying, but they didn't have any policies. They had no training. So again, perhaps it was just, here's all of our information package. It's there if you want to read it. Who's going to say yes to that? At the end of the day, at conciliation, what they resolved this complaint with was, okay, let's get some training for our organisation. Let's make sure that we have a policy from now on, and that people get to know about it. And for that one, there was a $4,000 payout. $4,000 is the $4,000 is $4,000, which is going to hurt, especially in a small business, I think. There was another case, and I don't have this one in front of me, so I'm sort of going to half guess it. But this was a case where I think the person it was another state. The lady was awarded $18,000 in damages. She appealed that, and by the time it went through the appeal, the tribunal awarded her $110,000 in the end. They increased it because when they looked at it under appeal, they said, you know what, this is serious. This needs to be taken differently. The impact on this, we now understand it better, and so we're actually going to increase that amount, which was quite substantial. So it was the workplace that appealed, not the lady. So sexual harassment, something to be very much aware of. The other thing I guess I just want to say about sexual harassment as well is it doesn't just happen to women. More often it happens to women, but sexual harassment can actually happen to anyone. And I worry in Australia there seems to be a culture that if we're not laughing at the sexualised jokes, we're not part of the team. We're considered a bit of a prude if we're not getting in there and having a giggle at it. And that can be quite damaging. It can make it quite hard for people to complain. It's very hard for a woman to complain about sexual harassment. I imagine it must be so much harder for a male in a lot of cases. So let's make sure that we're aware of that for everybody, not just for females. Victimisation is something that is incredibly serious. Victimisation is the reason a lot of people don't complain. We hear about this in training sessions all the time. If I dare to say anything, there goes my job. This is Tasmania. If I say anything in this organisation, I'm not going to get a job in any other organisation. I'll get treated worse in this particular situation. Victimisation is unlawful. Victimisation should also be covered in your workplace policies, okay? And your staff need to understand that they have the right to complain. If I was running a business, I would make sure that all of my staff knew that they could come to me at any stage if they had an issue. Now, those things aren't fun to deal with, but I would rather someone came to me when something was small and easy to fix. So I would want my processes to be transparent, I would want them to be safe, and I would want people to know that that's okay to come to me with those, as frustrating as they may be when I have to deal with them. A lot of people say, why didn't the person just come to me? Why did they go to the Anti-Discrimination Commission with this complaint? Often it's because they don't know how. They don't know how to use your policies, or, like I just said, more importantly, often I'm too afraid to use the policy. So lots of reasons to make sure that you're aware that victimisation is unlawful. Also encourage your staff how to have these conversations. If somebody comes to you and says, I feel like I've been treated unfairly, then don't be defensive back at them. Just go, yeah, sure, okay, let's have a chat about that. Let's see what that looks like. Let's see if we can fix this. Let's see if we can understand it as well, because it may not be unfair treatment. So, in regards to employees' responsibilities and rights, let's look at employees first. Employees have the right to have their performance judged on their skills, knowledge and ability. Same for any of us. We all have the right to work in a discrimination, harassment and bullying-free environment. We all have the right to make a complaint without victimisation or fear of victimisation. Now, none of this is rocket science. None of this is anything that we shouldn't already be aware of. They have responsibilities on the flip side of that. So, an employee also has a responsibility to not discriminate, harass, or bully anyone else, including the boss, to comply with their workplace policies, to positively contribute to a fair and respectful workplace. Everybody has a responsibility as far as that one. For employers, a few more slides for employers. Employers have the right to appoint, manage and dismiss staff as appropriate, to expect reasonable performance for staff. Discrimination law is not saying that you no longer have the right to choose things as you wish and to manage things as you wish, just making sure that they're fair. You can determine the work that needs to be done. You can set reasonable performance expectations. You can require compliance with the workplace code of conduct and dress code. You can expect an appropriate standard of behaviour from your customers and your clients. You absolutely. People often say, oh, well, as an employer, I've got no choices anymore. Of course you have. You have responsibilities on the flip side of that to operate in a safe and non-discriminatory way for your workers and customers. You're already, like I said before, aware of your workplace health and safety responsibilities. You know you have to operate in a safe under workplace health and safety legislation way. You also need to do that in a non-discriminatory way. If you get allegations, you need to take them seriously. A lot of employers, when they receive an allegation of bullying or harassment, will either jump in too fast and it actually gets a bit messed up because they think, oh, better take it seriously and let's get involved here, without thought, without consideration, without preparation. Or they choose to pretend they didn't hear it and hope it goes away, which isn't going to work either. So take them seriously, act promptly, make sure there's no victimisation, make sure you're supporting both parties, respondent and complainant, and they should be communication process to both parties all the way through. Some employers think, excuse me, some employers think I can't, I'm not going to give anyone any information until I've got something good to tell them. That communication is so important. Look, nothing's happened with your complaint as yet, just letting you know that things are progressing. Even something as simple as that can be really useful and really helpful for both parties. Making sure there's confidentiality and transparency as well with any allegations. Make it easy for staff to bring an issue to your attention. We hear employers say, oh, but my door is always open. That's not really going to work. It needs to be more than that. People need to, and it can take time. It can take only a very short amount of time to get a bad culture in your workplace. It can take a lot of years to get rid of that. You need to keep working at it. It needs to be a continual thing. You know, this is important to me. This belongs to all of you as staff. Let's make sure we're not discriminating. Thanks, staff, for bringing this issue to your attention. Reassure them they won't be victimised. And again, strive for and maintain a culture of zero tolerance with inappropriate behaviours. Provide training for all staff. That training needs to be about appropriate workplace behaviours. It needs to be about support mechanisms. It needs to be about your policies. That'll do. For responsibilities, monitor your workplace at all times. Don't wait for a complaint. Be careful that you don't prejudge. Make sure you stay impartial when you're dealing with these things as well. And think about where you're keeping your records of complaints. And again, I know it was on the last slide, but it's important to strive for and maintain a culture of zero tolerance to inappropriate behaviour. Okay, so how we can help. If you go to our website, there's plenty of information for organisations on there. We have a newsletter that comes out monthly. You're welcome to subscribe to that. We always have frequently asked questions in there, and we try to have topical, whatever happens to be topical at the moment. If someone emails us in a good question, we try and include that in the respective rights. You can also just talk to us. If you think, goodness me, I wonder if that's going to be discriminatory, there's nothing wrong with ringing you first and saying, you can do it anonymously if you want to. Just hypothetically, is this an okay thing to do? There's nothing wrong with those questions. It's probably a good idea. So feel free to get in touch with us if you wish. There's a copy of all of our posters there. Details for our office. And that takes us to questions submitted, and it's back to you, Steph, with nice timing, 15 minutes for questions.
Thank you very much, Roz. As Roz said, you can still submit questions through the questions pane in your attendee control panel, so please do. One thing that I just want to get you to sort of explain, Roz, is that I know under the Anti-Discrimination Act you can apply in certain circumstances for an exemption. If you can just explain what that is.
Yep, absolutely. So two things. So there are exceptions already written into the Anti-Discrimination Act, and there are 32 of those. So they're things that give permission for discrimination. So jobs that may be advertised as Aboriginal or Torres Strait descent, people must apply who fit there. That's covered by an exception already in the Act. The Girl Guide's covered by an exception that's already in the Act, and you can certainly go to our website and have a look at that, and there's also a few pages of information on exceptions and exemptions. So those ones already exist, and if you had a complaint made against you, it may be that you could rely on, you could prove why that exception applied to you and use it as a defence. What Steph was just talking about, however, are exemptions. I might write to the Commissioner and ask for permission to discriminate. For example, Metro, this is an old one, but Metro years ago had realised that they only had, I think, 1 or 2 female bus drivers at the time. The community was letting them know, we want female bus drivers. There was no good reason to not have female bus drivers, and they needed to address that past discrimination. So they asked the Commissioner at the time for permission to employ just females for a period of time. The Commissioner can grant an exemption to last for 3 years, give permission for that. For the Metro one, she gave permission for 1 year. At the end of that 1 year, I think they asked for an extension of that, which wasn't granted. And ever since then, they've employed from both genders fairly. Other ones, we've had positions, a recent one, the university wanted particular exemptions to have particular student advisors, so a diversity advisor, an LGBTI advisor and so forth, and they asked for permission to make sure the people that filled those positions were of that attribute. And what they had to do was write into the Commissioner, this is why we would like to have this is why we want to be able to discriminate, can we or can't we? These days, Robin, the Commissioner, likes to generally put a training condition on exemptions, just to make people understand, because she's basically giving permission to break legislation, and she usually grants it for a year, and then opportunities to reapply each year. I think I've answered that okay, but there's lots more information on the website, or again, just feel free to call in if anyone's interested in having an exemption and would like to know more about how to apply.
Okay, just another point that also comes to mind. If, for example, a job organisation or small business places a job advertisement with a newspaper, they may, for example, indicate that they would like someone of a certain age. That newspaper rings up your office and says, we've got this newspaper advertisement which we think might be discrimination. Can the newspaper still publish that ad, or do you, I guess, take it upon yourself to contact that organisation?
Okay, so if someone is advertising something on someone's behalf, or even running a business on someone's behalf, so perhaps a real estate agent on behalf of an owner of a unit, or a recruitment business, employment agency who are recruiting staff on behalf of someone else. If they're hearing about something that's discriminatory, I say I want to run an ad saying no one under a certain age, or I say for my accommodation I don't want anyone who's under a certain age, or for employment, same deal. Not only can that person have a discrimination complaint made against them, but so can the agency acting on their behalf. So if, let's say, the Mercury ran that ad for the people without checking, then there could be a complaint made against the Mercury as well as the person who wants to run the ad. Same with accommodation. The person that owns a unit could have a complaint made against them as well as the real estate agency, and the same with the recruitment sort of example. So I'm just thinking if I've answered your questions right, Steph. So yeah, I guess we do sometimes get phone calls from people, and it has happened in regards to newspapers. Is it okay to run this ad? And on our advice in the past, they've certainly got back to that person and said, no, we're not going to do that. The person, in some cases, can certainly get in. Sorry, in past cases, we have had people that have got in touch with us and said that's not fair. They can also run complaints if they wish, if they feel that it's because of an attribute that goes, so it's gone against them as well. Does that answer that?
Yes, certainly.
Good.
Okay, just while any further questions are coming through, I'll just run through what else is happening during WorkSafe Tasmania month, which I mentioned at the start, does run until the 30th of October. So do head to the WorkSafe Tasmania website, have a look at what else we are running. We do have webinars running this week still at 10 a.m. and again at 2 p.m. So do go to the website, have a look at the events calendar, or alternatively have a look at the program of events. Next week we do start our venue and live feed sessions again at the University of Tasmania. So live feed sessions, you can either be part of the live panel discussion, attend the event at the University of Tasmania, or alternatively, if you can't get to that event, you can again be at the comfort of your office space or desk and click onto the UTAS link and watch via your computer as well. But again, the webinars are still continuing right up until the end of WorkSafe Tasmania month. And as well, just before you do leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey, so we do appreciate you providing us with your feedback about today's presentation, also about your webinar experience too. Question, Roz, is there anything I can do if I witness someone being harassed?
Okay, yes there is. Yes there is. There's a whole bunch of stuff. I guess it's quite a big question. It can depend on the situation. So number one, I'm going to say check in with the person that they're okay. I think is a number one. All right, so let's just park that one. You can perhaps report that to your HR department. It depends really. It depends on what you've seen and how and all of those other things. As far as have you seen something that's discriminatory, you can only lodge a complaint as such to our office if you are of the attribute. If it's been unfair treatment to you. So I have to, if I'm a complainant, it's because something has happened because of my race, age, etc., where I've been treated unfairly. There are other situations where people can lodge complaints on people's behalf, but it's fairly prescriptive. It's in the Act and it's quite clear as to who actually can do that. So I can't just lodge a complaint on behalf of my workmate in the majority of situations. But something else that we have is our report it form, and if you go to our website you'll be able to see that. Often we have people who may have been treated unfairly, they're not comfortable to lodge a complaint. Sorry, it hasn't happened to them, they can't lodge a complaint, or perhaps they're just not comfortable to put their name on a complaint form. You could fill out the report form and that will actually come into our office. It depends on what it is as to what we do about it. We may just ring up the organisation and say, hey, look, just wondering what you would do in this sort of situation. We received quite a few reports in relation to the way people were being treated on buses. So the Commissioner had a meeting with the CEO of Metro a couple of years ago and they talked about what could be done in regards to racism on buses. So it's sort of, it helps us, helps our office to be able to target training, target research and so forth to help cover things, but also sometimes it can result in a nice simple conversation with someone and try and educate, not about getting people in trouble, try and educate them to not do it again. But in your workplace, I think number one, check on the person, see if they're okay. Sometimes it's worth calling out the code of conduct and saying, look, I think that might be discriminatory. You could even say, I attended a webinar and the person there was banging on about discrimination and I think this is what they were talking about. You might not want to use that language or treat someone in that way. Hopefully that's answered that question.
Yes, thank you, Ros. So on that last question, thank you very much, Ros from the Office of the Anti-Discrimination Commissioner for presenting this morning's webinar, Small Business, Protect Your Reputation, Know Your Discrimination Rights and Responsibilities. Again, if you have any other questions, you're quite welcome to contact the Office of the Anti-Discrimination Commissioner. And again, when you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation and we would appreciate you completing and providing your feedback. So on behalf of WorkSafe Tasmania and our presenter, thank you for joining us today and have a great, safe and healthy rest of the day. Thank you, Ros.
Thanks, Steph. Thanks, everyone. Bye.